can seem like a no-brainer to just integrate sources, to use sources in your writing. But in 202, we're going to think a little bit about the different moves you can make, uh, how you make them, and why you might want to make them. It tends to be that people have one or another way of incorporating sources that is sort of their favorite way. And I want you to have all these tools at your disposal. So we're going to think about summary, paraphrase, and direct quotation all together. So before we dive into the differences, I'd like to emphasize one thing that's similar, which is when you bring in ideas, words specifically, or just the general concepts and use the form that somebody else has used or information that they've gathered, we want to cite that source. So in in-text methods, whether it's MLA, APA, or others, in the body of your essay, you're mentioning the author, either by putting that in parentheses after the source has been mentioned or and used, quoted, or sometimes we read into it and we actually mention the name in the body of the writing, and then you don't have to put it in parentheses. But that's part A, and then the flip side is at the end of your essay, you have a works cited or bibliography that lists the full information on those sources. And it's important to emphasize that you cite those sources regardless of whether you're quoting directly or summarizing or paraphrasing. So, um, why do we want to use sources? Sometimes it's to make sure we are giving credit so that we're not plagiarizing. It can also be used to strengthen your argument. Maybe you have some information or you have an insight, but you're not sure that you have the authority to convince people. So you bring in additional authorities to do that. So you have options of different ways to do that. And so I just want to spend a moment thinking about why you might choose each option or when each option might be preferable. So one way to think about it is that you're either using your own words or other people's words, and you're either compressing it a lot or you're just recasting in your own words. So a summary needs to be in your own words, but it tends to compress things. So you're giving some basic idea, but you're not using all of the specific details, and you're not using any of the phrases or sentences that the original does. A paraphrase is a lot closer to the original. It will give a lot more detail, but you're still casting it all in your own words. Okay, that's crucial. Or if you feel like it's so particular, so specific, the language, the information that you want to convey, that you need to give the exact words from the source. Maybe it's precisely worded, maybe it's highly technical, maybe it's just really well written, and you feel like when you put it into your own words, you lose something. That's when you use direct quotation. And it's important whenever you're using a source and when you're taking notes that you keep track of what you're doing. There are famous cases, like even in the news right now, the president of Harvard University is. Some people are challenging her status as president and calling for her to resign, in part because she was accused of plagiarizing something in her dissertation, right? Of adding other people's language without appropriately signaling it, without putting in quotation marks and attributing the source. Um, so you don't want to do that. Always cite your source whenever you're in doubt. Make sure you cite it so that you don't get into a situation. And if you lose track of where material came from, if you have words that you know aren't your own, but you're not sure where it came from, the safest thing to do is just cut those. Don't make the mistake. So here's an example of a source, a paragraph from an article called Digital Natives, Digital Immigrants. So we're supposing that maybe this is something we're writing or researching about, and here's some good information here. A lot of detail in this passage, but I want to take some ideas from it and use it in my own writing to represent something. So if I summarize it, I'm going to take all of the information in that 150 word paragraph, and I'm going to compress it, right? So this would be an example of a very succinct summary of that paragraph. The title of the piece is Digital Natives. So Digital Natives suggests that students are so shaped by digital technology surrounding that schools can no longer effectively teach them unless they adapt. So you can see here that that's super general. It leaves out a lot of detail, but it has the benefit of conveying very quickly some key ideas. You might notice also that I put the name of that author in parentheses. So that's my way of signaling this is not my idea, it's coming from somewhere else. So maybe I feel like that level of compression is a little too general, a little too vague. Maybe I have the space to include a bit more detail, or maybe I just think the particulars are more important. So I give it a couple of sentences of summary. So that the first paragraph was, let's see, how long was that? Maybe that's 150 words, and so my paraphrase is about 50, 60 words. So instead of quoting directly, I've included a lot more detail, but I'm still putting it all into my own words. So in this case, I name the author. Mark Prensky suggests critics of American education may be missing one of the main reasons for the crisis, etc. So you can see these are my words, but Prensky's ideas. That's why I need to signal him. And in this case, because I set it up with a signal phrase, I decided, hey, I'll highlight who this person is and what argument they're making. I didn't have to put it in parentheses. And of course, this is a digital publication, so there's no page numbers. If it were from a book or print journal, I'd put page numbers. Here's a third option. Let's say I thought there was something so pointed about the way Prensky represented this idea that I needed to include some of his own words. So I don't just drop a quote in there. I set it up according to Mark Prensky. Here's a situation. Critics of American education are missing one of the main reasons for the crisis. So those are my own words there at the beginning, right? Similar to my paraphrase, right? So I'm giving the setup using some of his idea, but then when I shift into his specific words, the fact that, quote, today's students are no longer the people our educational system was designed to teach, unquote, right? So I was able to signal in that passage, I'm not using somebody else's words. I'm not using my own words. I'm using someone else's, and so I put it in direct quotes. And I always have to choose. I can't mix and match. I can't be sort of my words, sort of the source's words. Like either choose to cast it all in your own words, or choose to get your source and represent it verbatim, right? If you happen to be quoting something at more length, MLA says 4 or more lines of prose, then instead of signaling that with quotation marks, you double indent it, and it makes it a little easier for your reader to know, oh, there's a big quotation. But be careful, don't overuse this trick. Often it looks like you're just sort of padding your writing if you have lots of big fat block quotations. Another problem or another potential downside to excessive block quotation is that it kind of distracts from whatever the focus or the purpose that you're articulating, because it kind of gives too much space to your source. You risk letting your source sort of steal the spotlight from you if you use excessive block quotation. It's a judgment call, and it may differ a little bit from one discipline to another, or different kinds of publications. But as a formal thing, if you do quote more than 4 lines, you can indicate it with a block quote. So the last thing I wanted to remind you of was you always have to choose. You're either quoting directly, as I have here in the top example, or you are paraphrasing all in your own words. Doing what kind of trying to split the difference is really hard to do legally, ethically, appropriately. So this middle example, where instead of quoting, I kind of changed every third word, but I'm basically still keeping somebody else's ideas and just not acknowledging it. That doesn't work. That's not a good paraphrase, and it's not a good quote. Even if I cited my source there, that would not pass muster. Similarly, people have sometimes come up with clever ways to sort of put things into non-quoted words, like double translating through Google, or presumably doing things with ChatGPT. It's important to be aware that could be considered a form of dishonesty. So you want to either write your own words or quote directly.